Hello and welcome to another session of Four Seasons on Saturday, a program which is devoted to the career and recordings of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. If you've been watching lately, you know that we've been dissecting the Snapper Four Season box set, working our way back to you, highlighting the bonus tracks in particular. And today we're going to continue that focus, resuming with CD number 16, the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette Mono, CD 17, the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette Stereo, CD 18, which is the mono and stereo of the Half and Half album, and then CD 19, which is the Rare and Unreleased, 1966 to 1971. Essentially, that's a CD composed of all bonus tracks, 23 bonus tracks. For our discussion, we have our usual cast, as of late anyway. Mr. Ken Charmer coming to us, as you can see, from sunny Spain now. There's no one more qualified than Ken to discuss the bonus tracks, since he was largely responsible for their presence in the box set. And as we've said before, solely responsible for the Motown Unreleased. And we must always remind ourselves to thank Ken for that.
By all means.
We also have from La La Land, George Perez in Los Angeles. George, music for all four seasons. Hopefully you're enjoying George's wonderful four-season videos on YouTube. And from Reno, Nevada, we have always ready to give us the West Coast perspective, Chuck Walker.
Yep.
And I'm Tony Colatrella, trying to keep warm here in wintry Pittsburgh, where the Pittsburgh Pirates opened their home season in snow. How about that climate change? I think it's working in reverse in most of the United States anyway.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to begin, starting with CD 16, the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette, in which there are 10 bonus tracks, all wonderful bonus tracks. But I think there's an obvious question right from the start, Ken. As you go down the list of those bonus tracks, you have to ask yourself, well, why are they in the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette CD? None of them have anything to do with that album, but I'm sure there's a very a reasonable explanation that you can give us.
Well, the thing is, Anthony, what do you do when you've got masses of tracks and you've got to put them somewhere? And there's a limit on the number of CDs, and it's an album CD box set. So you try to find space to put the bonus tracks. And so far, as we've been able to discuss, the bonus tracks have always been on the same timeline as the album. And it's been possible to accommodate the primary bonus tracks and fit them in along with the album. So the context of the individual tracks was complementing the album. The problem was that we had too many. And so as we had found the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette mono album on tape for the first time, and as Snapper were going to feature that on the vinyl insert, the decision was also discussed about whether it should be put out on CD. And the conclusion was that it should be on CD as well as vinyl, because not everybody wants to play their vinyl or even open the sealed copy,
right?
Because of its value. So we thought, well, we've got these two CDs, and there's 20 minutes spare on each CD. What do we do? So we had the mono album. So we thought, well, what mono tracks have we got left over? And so that's what we pulled together. So so the instrumentals that were left over from 65, Sassy and Nighthawk, the I've Got You Under My Skin Mono 45, which hadn't featured anywhere else. Electric Stories, which was in context because some say it was earmarked to be part of the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette album. And then following on from albums around this time, this album and subsequent singles, we had I Make a Fool of Myself in mono, and then September Rain. And the important thing about September Rain was we nearly messed up with that because the mono 45 is different to the album version, and it is actually a different jazz arrangement done by Archie Schrock. And fortunately, right at the last hour, this in the quality check that I was doing became obvious, and I contacted Ray Nickel, our vinyl expert, and he was able to send a digitized copy down to the engineer, and it just scraped in to the box set. So September Rain was a very late ad. We had to give in mono as well, and then the rest of the album was of that CD was devoted to whatever we had left over. But Michael and Peter obviously fitted because this was the time that Watertown was being also recorded with Frank Sinatra, and the only track that Frankie did a full demo of a song from Watertown was Michael and Peter. So fortunately, somebody who I think is close to Bob Gaudio had sent me a master copy of that because I only had it as a cassette copy. So we're very fortunate to get a pristine copy of Michael and Peter into it. And this is just some of the, the digging deep stories behind some of these tracks that come up. And that was what we put on. But in the approved list, because we didn't know how many tracks we were actually going to be able to fit on, we were doing rough timings. We thought, well, we've still got the mono versions on the Good Ship Lollipop and You Nobody Till Somebody Loves You. And we thought we might squeeze them in here, but for some reason, Snapper decided that wasn't going to be the case. So
they're elsewhere. Yeah, they're elsewhere.
They became outros to this box set. We've got them, but they're in the sort of outtakes from the album set.
I think they're on CD10. They're on CD10.
Yeah, they are in stereo.
Yeah, right.
The monos. And
there is
two alternative takes of that, Anthony, that came up. Take 3 of both of those tracks, which are not the same as the final take that went in. So I've got those again in the outtakes. The other track that Snapper decided to put in here was A Face Without a Name. But there was never a true stereo copy of that. It was on the box, it said pseudo stereo. So I extracted it and compared it with the Ace version that was released.
Well, that should have been with Half and Half, I would say.
Yeah, it should have been. And that's where originally I'd placed it. But for some reason, they put it here. And it is, I think, the pseudo stereo, unless the engineer mixed it to mono. But it was on a mono tape in the storage, but against it had written pseudo stereo. So that's how we pulled together the remnants of mono leftovers that ran up to this time.
Yeah. I had a question on getting back to Michael and Peter. That came directly from Bob Gaudio's own sort of personal archive or personal file, whatever you want to call it.
I suspect so. I can't remember the name of the guy. Well, probably would get him into trouble if I said
it. Don't mention any names. Yeah.
No, don't mention any names. No, don't quote me.
And looking at it from the fans' perspective, which I like to do, you mentioned Electric Stories as sort of being a harbinger of the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette album. So I always wondered, in that period of time, the release of songs didn't seem to make any sense. You know, they did Going Back to Watch the Flowers Grow. Then they went, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? Then they did Saturday's Father, which was actually in the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette album. And then they did Electric Stories. I don't know. It didn't seem to really make a lot of sense if they were trying to build up to the release of the album.
The way I see it from the research, they actually recorded Saturday's Father as the first track. It was the first master that was done. In fact, it was done twice. I'm pretty sure it's done twice. I think if you look at the Phillips notes, it appears.
That was,
it
I think it was from April of '68. Yeah,
it was originally titled Father's Day.
Yeah.
And that's the way it appeared on one of the tape boxes. But I know from Charlie Colella's interview that he said that they really believed Electric Stories was, you know, a dynamic 45 that would strike a chord and hit well. And I remember hearing it on UK radio, and it stood out. And I thought, what a great changing sound by the Four Seasons.
Here's as a fan, this was my impression at the time when I heard they didn't play it in New York City, hardly at all. I think maybe you heard it one time and that was it. I understand that the program directors or the disc jockeys didn't think it was a Four Seasons sound, so they weren't going to play it. But when I first heard it, I was somewhat disappointed because I thought the guitar was way. I'm not an expert on mixing records, but I thought the guitar was way too loud. It kind of muffled over Frankie's vocals, which of course is very unusual. And you really couldn't understand what he was saying almost. I don't know. I didn't think that was produced or mixed.
I think that was deliberate, Anthony.
Oh yeah, it was. It was, as it turns out, because if you read through the box set book, I came to the interview they did with Mike Petrillo, who wrote the song, along with Sandy Linzer, and he said that he told the guitarist to play louder, to play jazzier, and play over the vocals. I don't quite understand that, but
maybe
Chuck,
maybe to give the song an edgier sound, or
I think you're right, George.
yeah.
Well, I think
I love that song.
One of the versions, I don't know if it was this bonus track or another one. I think it sounds much better because the guitar doesn't seem to be over the vocals. The vocals seem to be up front. And it sounds much better to me.
Maybe I should remix it, Tony.
Yes, remix it, Ken.
If you go back to that time in history, as we've all talked in the past, music was changing. You were getting more and more of the psychedelic sounds.
Yeah.
And the guitar was becoming a lead figure in the music, and the Jimi Hendrix gamesmanship with the strings and so forth was making new sounds. And it's possible that Gaudio and Colella would pick this up and were trying to.
No, it wasn't. That was not a Colella. That was not a Gaudio song. That was not. No. That was done by Petrillo and Linzer.
No, I know, but Gaudio produced it, and
no, it was not.
They were trying.
They had Linzer. I mean, Linzer and Petrillo had left Crewe and Gaudio, and they were on their own at Epic when that was made.
Yeah, but they wrote
Gaudio
it.
Gaudio still produced it.
Gaudio produced it. Yeah,
I thought it was Linzer and Petrillo who produced it. That's why they left, because they wanted to produce on their own. Maybe they relented and let Gaudio.
Maybe.
Well, you know, a lot of their sounds in that era are focused on, in my mind, they're trying to pick up a different audience and get away from the doo-wop season sound.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
this is one of the ways they were doing it.
That song wasn't even written for the Four Seasons because Petrillo and Linzer had left. They were at Epic. They were producing on their own, and they were writing for another group, a group that was on Epic. But I don't know. Maybe they played it for Valli or Gaudio, and they said, "Oh, that's something different. We're looking for something different. we want to record that. That's apparently what happened.
I think
If
you're
you
right,
read those
Anthony.
interviews.
They were jumping around on everything at this time, and when you look at when you play this disc and you listen to these tracks, okay, so they're out of context, but I think the Four Seasons were out of context at this time because you've got Frankie Valli doing his follow-up to "Can't Take My Eyes Off You," "I Make a Fool of Myself," then doing a jazz version of "September Rain," which is actually released as a single and then changed and a completely different arrangement, and a longer version on the album. Then he does a ballad like "To Give," and then later, as we slip into the later part of 68 and 69, they do "A Face Without a Name," which is a beautiful, beautiful and touching ballad, which
very.
It's just so underrated as a song, and that's
I thought that
I did the.
I thought that should have been picked up by some country western singer. It has a country western sort of flavor to it.
Yeah, I know. I noticed. Well, if you listen to the YouTube video, I've been able to pick out the individual elements of the piano, and it uses a stereo effect. I'm able to use the stereo effect very well, and I think I was able to take. I think it's one of the best mixes I've ever done of a Frankie Valli song, where you're able to isolate things like the piano and the guitar, and just let them stand out when they come in. It's a fantastic track, I think.
It is.
That was on the flip side of "The Girl I'll Never Know."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
there are also two songs on that CD which are unique in their format to the Four Season group, and that they're instrumentals. "Sassy" and "Nighthawk" are instrumentals which were only released as the back flip sides of singles, and they just disappeared. You never hear them anywhere.
I was listening the other day.
Reynolds took it.
Yeah, I know. I was listening the other day to El Van Dyke, who with the Funk Brothers was at Motown, and I thought to myself, the Four Seasons were trying to copy this guy's sound.
I thought it sounded mostly like Booker T and the MGs.
Well, it's a bit of a cross between
the Memphis sound with that, the heavy organ.
Well, well, El Van Dyke was, a heavy organist on the Funk Brothers, and did 2 or 3 albums of instrumentals, and they're all great.
Yeah.
But I just don't think the Four Seasons made a very good job of it. Don't know about you guys.
Well, I don't think they were. It was sort of like, I don't know, maybe they didn't have anything else to put on those other sides at the moment.
It's just throwaway stuff, isn't it, Chuck?
Yeah.
So, okay, on to 17 then. Disc 17.
On to 17. So let's see.
So this is where we picked up the stereo versions.
Yes, you had. There's 6. There's 6. I guess you might say almost like collector stereo versions.
Yeah. Well, the actual funny story about "I Make a Fool of Myself" is Bob Gaudio wrote to Snapper and asked if we had a copy of "I Make a Fool of Myself" in stereo, because it had been lost.
A lot of things there, right?
Wow.
It actually turned up at the 11th hour in April 2021 when we were scraping the barrel with Bill Inglett, and he discovered a big reel with a guy called Tal Miller, who was the engineer, was digitizing all of this, and we found a polygram tape, and it was there in glorious stereo. Now, I'm sure it has appeared in stereo before, but I'm not sure where. Can't recall where. I think it may be on one of the Ace CDs, but
that song never it came out as the single, but then it did not appear on the Timeless album, it didn't appear on the Frankie Valli solo album, or his second, the Timeless album. It wasn't on either of those albums for some reason.
No, that's strange. But the other strange thing about when we're doing these bonus tracks is I discovered that Electric Stories only ever appeared on CD on the well, not on CD, but on
25th anniversary.
the
It's on the 25th
25th
anniversary.
anniversary set. It was never released in stereo before then, which
Oh,
which
Well,
interesting.
that also didn't make any album until the Four Seasons. Well, Frankie was on Private Stock, and Private Stock released that album called The Four Seasons Story.
Yeah.
And that actually included Electric Stories. It's not found in any other album.
yeah. Well,
Right.
the other tracks that turned up, like the Singles Game, we were lucky to find that on a what appeared to be a pretty poor tape, but it turned out that Bob Crewe must have transferred the master over to the storage, and we were able to pull that out in stereo. But it had appeared on the Ace CDs in the past, and we got excited about "Tell It to the Rain," and I thought we'd just found the unique stereo when I was stumbling through the 25th anniversary set reels, and somebody tells me that actually it's not the unique stereo, because that version is the same as the version that appears on Edition Doro.
I have a question.
But I'm
Again,
not sure about that.
This is from a fan's perspective. So I bought of course, the Tell It to the Rain single.
Yeah.
And then shortly there, I don't know how long after, maybe a year after, don't recall, but the album came out, New Gold Hits, which Tell It to the Rain was on that. But when you play it, it has the strange, the part where Frankie goes, yeah, 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 yeah. On the New Gold Hits album, he goes, yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, he also says,
That's right.
Gonna change, or going to change. He varies the vocal slightly on the album version to the single version.
I don't know why they kept that in. Why didn't they say, Frankie, what happened? What are you doing?
Well, it's just
You're supposed to go, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but they picked the wrong take. Because you remember when New Gold Hits was pulled together, Tell It to the Rain had been recorded earlier.
Yes, yeah, much earlier.
When they got to 1967 and pulling these things together for the New Gold Hits album, they didn't pull the right versions in. They did the same thing with I'm Gonna Change. Well, we'll come to that when we get to it.
Don't they have a proofreader?
But but of course the big discovery and one of the outstanding sound quality tracks is Raven, because we discovered this big reel, Bill Inglet, with 8-track, 4 copies of takes from the session on 8-track, and he sent them all to us, mixed down to stereo, and the actual 4th take was the one that was used for the Ace CD. So that one is put in here as the stereo version, but there were 4 takes, and we'll come to the other takes a bit further on. But the big mistake in the box set was, and I blame myself for this, for not looking carefully enough, and I wasn't involved in the quality checking, so I didn't cross-check things at the end. And the engineer, well, the tapes were marked up with You've Got Your Troubles, a stereo, and it was marked up on a tape box, and it appeared to be the Philips version.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out that it wasn't. It was the Motown version.
Is there any difference? Was there any difference between the two?
Oh yeah, there's about 30 seconds difference. Yeah, the 30 second. I think the Motown version runs 408, and the Philips version runs about 330, 335, something like that. So that's a quality control problem that couldn't be helped. So, but you can see the way we're juggling all these tracks around and trying to find a place for them. It's very difficult to pin everything down exactly and get it all in the right place. And at the end of the day, it was Snapper's decision what they actually put out, not mine.
Right.
So by the time we got to 18 became a bit of a problem for us, because we knew that Half and Half had been discovered in mono, which was previously unreleased. So all the mono tracks on the Half and Half disc 18 are all unreleased tracks. And in some cases, they are very different mixes. And Anthony knows about this because we talked about it extensively, didn't we, Anthony?
Mm-hmm.
With one track. And I'm
Circles
still
in the
not
Sand.
totally sure about all of the versions that exist from the Half and Half album. So you want to tell us about Circles in the Sand, Anthony?
You want to get to it now, or because it's on the rare and unreleased, isn't it?
Well, it's on yeah, but it's on 18 in a unique version.
Yeah.
It's
Well, yeah. So I was going through YouTube, as I often do, and I came across the circles. Someone had posted Circles in the Sand, but the photo they used, they showed the picture of the CD, the rare and unreleased, from the box set. So I said, oh, someone has posted a song from the box set, and the person's name with the initials KV. And I recalled that this fellow had posted other songs from the box set. So I listened, and when I, got to the end of the song, Frankie is singing, and Frankie ends singing the song. And I said, that's an entirely different version. I go, that's not in the box set. So I played all three songs that are in the box set. All three songs in the box set have the piano fade out. None of them have Frankie singing to the end. And I recalled hearing a similar version to this a few years ago with Frankie singing to the end. And someone commented that this is the version that Frankie sings in concert live.
Yeah.
And yet this fellow was passing this off as coming from the box set. So I commented to him and I said, that's not in the box set. Where'd you get that version from?
Yeah.
Well, there was a special pressing of the 45.
Yes. Well, the same fellow also posted elsewhere that 45, which has a mono version and a stereo version, on one on the other side.
That second side, the stereo version, didn't exist in the Four Seasons storage at all.
Yeah,
we never found it. In fact, we never got the mono album tracks either. So we weren't able to compare the two albums, the mono and the stereo. We thought they were just the same. We were never sent them over to check. So it wasn't until the box set came out that we actually found out that the unique mono mixes are unique. So the mistake in the box set is completely down to the fact that we didn't quality check every single track, which was a huge problem anyway. But the important thing is that those tracks are available. That we've got them in the archive, the outtakes. So it's just great to have a very, very high quality sound version in mono, because the stereo tape is not as good, and none of the stereo versions of the album that have come out, neither the Ace or the I don't know whether there was I don't think Rhino did it, but it's only the Collector's Choice version there is reasonably good stereo quality. So in actual fact, my feelings are that the mono version of Half and Half is actually a much crisper sounding set. And the only bonus track they were able to squeeze on, because we had both the mono and stereo, and it's quite a long album, was the stereo version of Dream of Kings, which has got its own story in itself.
But just to get back to Circles in the Sand, what do you think about that version, that promotional version? It sounded like to me that they took a studio version, because there's an obvious stop, a very microsecond pause.
It's a splice, Anthony. There's two versions spliced together.
they splice. It sounds like they spliced maybe a recording of a live version onto the studio version.
They may well have done that, but they also sometimes had to do a live version in the studio with the union reps because that had come up a couple of years before when all the Timeless album. You remember?
Well, they may have done that, but it was the versions that went on to the original 45 and the album.
But they made a decision to edit it, but instead of editing it by fading it, they edited it by splicing the two versions.
I wondered why they just didn't re-record the whole record with Frankie singing to the end. It seemed like very odd.
Yeah, it's a totally valid comment, Anthony.
Yeah. Well, I like that version, though. I like with Frankie singing all the way to the end better.
Yeah.
Than the piano fade out.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not really totally sure about whether we've got all of the versions of Dream of Kings that were found, because we did find a copy on tape, but George Ingram's discography indicates that there may be an album version which is a different take, Dream of Kings, which was from a movie, wasn't it? Or for a movie?
Well, it wasn't from a movie, right?
There is an album version on the movie soundtrack.
It was written for a movie, but it wasn't used in the movie, right?
Yeah. Nobody knows.
Dream of Kings. Yeah, it was. From what I understand, it was actually written for the movie, but they didn't use it in the movie. But then they put it on the movie soundtrack album. And why didn't they use it in the movie? Because when you listen to it, I say, oh, that sounds like it would be a good, song, as the opening credits are showing, playing that song. So I went back and I looked up the movie Dream of Kings, and I know why they didn't use it. Why? Because the song has absolutely nothing to do with the theme of the movie. I don't know what Gaudio and Holmes were thinking. They obviously didn't read the book or the movie plot or watch the movie, because it has nothing to do with the plot of the movie. That's probably why they
were maybe just given the title and told to write something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Interesting. But what's also interesting is that they left it on the actual soundtrack.
Yeah, well, I guess they paid Gaudio and Holmes to do it, so they wanted to get some use out of it. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's a good song in and of itself, but it's not. It has nothing to do with the movie.
No, it's another one that I think, along with A Face Without a Name, shows Valli's solo capability.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a good song.
Much stronger than some of the earlier tracks that he did for Timeless, and I know that some of the stuff on Timeless is great, but it's a different.
Oh, that's all good.
In terms of a straightforward ballad, passionate ballad, A Face Without a Name and Dream of Kings are both exceptionally delivered. So that was disc 18. Takes us on to
19.
The big one, where we didn't know whether we could. Well, we thought, can we fill this?
23 tracks.
And then we thought, we've got too many. You
never have too many.
Yeah, that's true.
You never have too many.
Nope.
Yeah, well, I sent you guys through the approved list, which Gaudio had approved, and I'd started this compilation with wanting to get a Northern Soul edge to some of the music, and knowing that the crowd love begging in Northern Soul clubs, and I'm Gonna Change was a big hit in the clubs. We had the instrumental versions and in mono, and they'd come through on a final acetate from Bill Inglett, and I thought these are great instrumental tracks, and they were different. One was extended, and the other one had a slightly punchier arrangement. I thought these are great to start a CD and get you in the feel of particularly the Northern Soul sound, which Frankie had had broken into with You Ready Now at about this time, 1970. So they were just deleted out by the engineer and by the admin people at Snapper for no apparent reason, other than they said it was poor sound quality. But if you've heard it on YouTube where I put it, put them both, you know that they sound perfectly great. So that was a strange one. But I was quite happy with Raven kicking off this CD when the final listing came. And I'd picked Take One, which on the box set it said guitar too loud.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, guitar too loud. It sounds great to me.
That
So,
should have been on Electric Stories.
yes,
Not
some
Raven.
sort of story.
Yeah.
Play the guitar louder, guys.
They put it on the wrong tape box.
Yeah. But there are four takes of that, and the engineer didn't include the count-in and the outros. The fade out, just the ending where everybody stops playing. And I wanted the tracks that had come from these tapes to really be raw, exactly the way they were, recorded, and to show that from a collector's point of view that they were the true collector's item. But the engineer edited everything out, as I've said before. But
the outro on Raven, it lasts a long time, as I recall.
yeah, it does. But you have to listen to the proper take to hear how the instruments stop and break up. But Take Four was the longest version, and the one that was chosen for the Ace release. I've not compared it to the 45 timing wise, but I'm not sure about that. But the other track that didn't get in was an alternative version of Patch of Blue, and it was the original mono. But when Bob Crewe had compiled the mono and mixed it, they must have decided that when it comes to the point where something needs to happen, he wanted to stop it and put in a falsetto interlude.
Yeah.
And that's just before the end. So this version I found was the Patch of Blue original without that insert. But having thought about it, we thought it doesn't sound as good as the final version. And if
you gotta have that falsetto interlude.
Yeah, I'd rather have the falsetto.
Definitely.
It just stops and starts the thing and gives it the impact of the fade out. So we left this Patch of Blue version out. So it was on the original list approved by Bob Gaudio, but left out. And then we got onto the very late stuff that was being pulled off the Phillips tapes by Bill Inglett, and there were 5 versions of Heartaches and Raindrops, and I didn't pay much attention to these and didn't think there was very much difference between them. They all finished abruptly, but I've looked at them just recently, and in fact today I've done a remaster of the 5th version, which is instead of being 3 minutes 14 seconds, it's 3 minutes 24, and the guitar player just stops, playing and just finishes.
As long as he got paid for.
He got fed up, I think, playing the.
I'm not playing anymore. I'm not getting paid.
Yeah. So I'm going to put that up on YouTube in the next few days.
Oh, great.
I've done it in the same immersive mix that I used for the Swearing to God track that I put up. We'll come to that when we get onto the 60 stuff.
Great track.
Session.
Great
Yeah.
track.
So that was Heartaches and Raindrops, and Where Are My Dreams was there. That was, but it's the same version as is on the Ace CD of Half and Half that came out in the 90s. There's nothing special about that. But Lay Me Down Lay Me Down version that had come out on the 1990 Rarities CD.
Rhino, yeah,
Rarities,
Rhino Rarities.
runs 6 minutes 10 seconds or 11 seconds, and that was the first time that fully extended version had ever been released, because it had only been out on a 3-minute 40 something second single. So
Right.
everybody raved about that. That was one of the big reasons for buying that collector's edition of Volume 2 of the Rhino Rarities. But we also found out that this song appeared elsewhere, both in alternative versions. So I found the mono version. I found a 5-minute 18 version, which has got a different guitar intro and different vocals by Frankie. And I found out that this appeared on a one of 3 tapes that Bill Inglett had found called Let This Time. That was the original title of it.
Yeah. Let This Time Be Mine.
And that brings me on to, the sort of what we were looking for this sort of period was, what could we find that was unreleased? And there were 3 tapes in the Philips archive, in the Four Seasons archive, which were all extracted from Philips reels. And there are about 8 reels, and every track is noted. It says reel 12, track 8, and then a title. And you've got strange titles like Cranberry. Who knew what that song was? But there were 27 tracks altogether. And what we found was that what we were told by Bill Inglett was that only 2 of them had vocals on.
Yeah.
The question, so we didn't get any of the 16 tracks sent over to us. Bill mixed the 2 tracks himself and gave us a mono version and a stereo version. Well, the mono version sounded crisper because Frankie's vocal wasn't buried so much. In the stereo version, his vocals buried a little bit. I'm going to remix that as well, and I will eventually put it out in stereo. But we found that Lay Me Down was really quite a busy time for Bob Crewe trying to get it right, and the Four Seasons, and it's totally different to anything else they've ever done. So putting the original title in, Let This Time, we never got the instrumental version sent over to us, so we don't know about that. But I'll maybe finish by talking about those. We talk about those 3 tapes and the tracks that were on them. Obviously, the other situation was the fact that there were 3 tracks recorded in London when the Four Seasons with Bob Grimm came over to do tour in the UK, as we've discussed many times online. And Sleeping Man, Whatever You Say, turned up on that tape, a Warner tape. And surprisingly, on the same tape, a totally country version of I Just Can't Help Believing.
Yeah, amazing. Hard to believe they were recorded at the same session.
Yeah, but the strange thing is, the 3 tapes that I'm going to talk about at the end, that song is on there. So Just Can't Help Believing had been rehearsed and instrumentally done in the US, and it was in the Philips archive, the Philips vault.
But it was recorded in the UK.
But it was actually recorded with a vocal in the UK, and that was on this UK Warner tape, and that's the version we salvaged. So that was of course.
Well, maybe they had lost their contract with Philips, so they couldn't. They didn't finish.
Well, they pulled the instrumental version. If what Bill says is the instrumental versions are on that tape, they could have just taken the instrumental and played it and recorded Frankie over it. Well, maybe that's
right. But hadn't they lost? They were no longer under contract to Philips when they went on the UK tour, right?
Yeah, but they'd taken all these 27 tracks, of which Just Can't Help Believing.
Yes, you're right. That's
Track was
right.
one of them.
They
So they had it, but
Yeah.
we don't know the story behind it. So that pulling those together meant that we had a set of stereo tracks to start off that album, and then the rest of the CD was compiled of the mono finds that we had, and obviously Bill Inglett was pulling everything that had 4 seasons on it, but he pulled one box that just had Begging and What Good Am I written on the box.
Yeah.
And nobody knew what was on it. And so he digitized it, sent it over to us, and it turns out to be Peggy Farina and Bob Gaudio doing the demo. Mono, it wasn't actually an acetate, it was actually a tape. So it was a master tape of the demo session. And What Good Am I? We have no idea who wrote it, where it came from, what the background is, but what a fantastic vocal by Frankie.
What good am I?
What Good Am I?
That was also a demo?
It was just a demo. It was never done as anything other way. That's just a piano and Frankie singing the demo.
Yeah. Very sparse.
Very sparse, yeah. But Frankie's vocal doesn't suffer as a result of it, does it?
No, not at all.
So we then we'd found the mono version of alternative version of I'm Gonna Change with a different vocal and a different fade out. And we'd found a mono version of Dream of Kings, which I can't remember whether they're exactly the same take. And equally, I can't remember whether Circles in the Sand isn't the unique mono version as we've already talked about, Anthony.
Hey, could I give you a fan's perspective again on Circles in the Sand? Who wrote that song?
Oh God,
I'm always interested in who wrote the song. And then if you don't see Crewe, Gaudio, or Lindsay Randell, you say, well, who are these people? Well, this song had 4 names, 4 complete strange names to me. And so I tried to find out who they were, but I couldn't find anything else about them. And then I stumbled upon this thing on YouTube once. That song actually was from some musical that was produced locally in Los Angeles. Did you see?
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It was from like 1970 or 1971. It was a play called Visigoths. And it turned out those 4 names there were the people who wrote the play. And 2 of them wrote the words and music. And after the play, they formed their own duo, which was called, I think it was some Prairie Madness. And then they recorded a LP for Columbia, but it didn't include that song. Didn't include the song Circles in the Sand. But that's
so
about
is this the only place it's ever appeared, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, maybe someone else recorded it, but they didn't, even though they wrote it. Wow. They didn't even put it on their own album.
Yeah.
Apparently it was, if I'm at it was written, apparently 4 composers, Chris Ducey, Ed Millis, Charles Watts, and Paul Stein.
Yeah, just the first 2, Chris Ducey and Ed Millis, were the ones who wrote the song. Those other 2 names, they wrote the play.
Oh, okay, thank you.
They wrote the play, but Ducey and Millis wrote the words and music to the songs in the play, one of which was Circles in the Sand. And then they just went out as a duo and they called themselves Prairie Madness.
Wow.
They did record it. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering, where did this song come from? Circles is a very good song.
Maybe it was influenced by Windmills of Your Mind.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It was a great track to include, but we were really packing stuff in here, and it's pretty random. But when we suddenly got a scan of an acetate, and it had the title "You Can't Take It All from a Man," I looked at Philip's listings on our website and noted that was the title it was recorded as. Now, I don't know which came first, but the song is a Larry Brown, Bob Crewe composition,
right?
But it has different words to the song One Man, but it's exactly the same melody. And in some parts, it's exactly the same arrangement. There's some wittering woman in a high-pitched voice at the very beginning, as it starts off, and it's not Frankie, or it's some sort of machine imitating a female voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Ooh, sound. I
And-
think the You Can't Take It All From a Man came first, and then they kind of rewrote it or redid it a bit, and then it was One Man.
Well, they
That's
did
what
it. They did it just themselves as a group, because clearly there's an orchestra and playing with them. You know, there's brass and other instruments on.
Oh
on,
yeah.
You Can't Take It All From a Man, but the lyric is really gungy and well, and
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I mean. I
the-
think it's better. It's better on the One Man than the first one.
yeah, and
Neither of them are great, but I think it's
got-
better.
we've got to always remember and just you know, put our hands up to heaven and say it all started with One Man. This whole thing, this whole
Yes,
box,
that's right.
and
That's
the
how it all
reason-
started for you, Ken.
The reason we're doing this today is because Elliot Goshman was looking for Leslie Gore Masters in the Philips archive, and he finds this can,
Yeah.
and it says 4 Seasons, One Man, Mono Master. That's all it said.
Wow.
And that was in 1990?
97.
97.
And he said, "You can have this." And I said, "No, they did one
Wow.
song. They didn't do One Man. It's called One Song." And he said, "No, it's not later. This is." And
One
I said,
Man.
I'll send it to you, but you have to promise me you'll always make it freely available to the fans. So he sent me a cassette, really well recorded, and he did a Dolby A and a Dolby C version on it as well. And so I remastered that, and you know the history, the story. It's been there influencing the fact that we know there was Motown unreleased. But of course, I sent it to
Yeah.
Peter Smith, didn't I?
Did he say, "Oh, that's not the Four Seasons"?
Yeah, no, that's not Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
He said that with a straight
There's
face,
nothing
too, I
left.
think.
There's nothing left of. They didn't do it. And,
Yeah, that's
you
not
know,
the Four
this
Seasons.
started the saga of lies,
Right, right.
and then he closed our website down
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
because
God.
we were using photographs of Frankie Valli on our website. So I got really upset about this, and so did the other guys. But we
Now,
started.
You
blame
should have told
you.
them that's not Frankie Valli.
Yeah, we started it again, and of course, this was a fad at the time with artists trying to protect their publicity rights, you know, their image rights.
Right.
But you know, a lot of groups did the same thing with their websites, but it faded out after a year, and we reset the website, and well, it's been there since, you know, been upgraded a few times. But
You know, if I can just add real quick, you know, had that one individual not have been going through what he was looking
Yeah.
for regarding Leslie Gore, that song, that real tape would have never been found.
no, and we may never have had this project. We never
Wow.
had any of this material. We never
I
have been.
mean, it's like, what else is hidden out there that nobody knows about? We may never see. I mean, you just never know. You never
Right.
know.
You never know.
Interesting.
Well, as Bill England has said, well, you never know. There is always going to be something out there,
Yeah.
and we'll continue to, as we go through. And I think we should do the rest of the bonus tracks all the way through, and
Yes.
even, and the live shows as well. To
What did they
review
find?
over time, all being well, because there's just so many backstories to how this happened and how it makes it all so unique that we've got it. You know, of course, there were other versions that we put in. I put in just How Loud Must the Music Play, because that was another track that was listed on the 3 tapes and was only supposed to be in instrumental form, no vocal on it. But then
Yeah.
Bill England finds an acetate recording of it with Frankie's vocal on. So that raised more and more questions for me about, well, what vocals of these 27 tracks do really exist, because the only ones we were told existed were the Goose that was originally called The Goose That Laid the Golden Egg, Sandy Lindsay composition, which is very Beatlesque, and I Need to Get to Know You, which subsequently turned out to be a Crewe Gaudio composition with Frankie Valli singing solo. That they're the only two that cropped up from
those 27
tapes.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I did find was that there was a version of One Man in the Four Seasons archive, but I'm not so sure that it wasn't the one that was found in 1997. I think that may have been subsequently supplied from my copy, which went to Peter Bennett, and then got back to maybe to Bob Gaudio.
Wow.
Went into the archive.
I was going to mention on The Goose, which is such an obviously an interesting title for a pop song, The Goose.
Yeah,
But I read somewhere, it was an interview of Sandy Lindsay, and he said before he sat down to write a song, he would spend a few hours just listening to records. So what record do you think he listened before he wrote The Goose? I figured that he had to have listened to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. Don't you think?
He did.
Yeah.
It sounds so Beatlesque.
It's so Beatlesque. Yeah. The lyrics are totally obscure, and and the thing is laden with brass and orchestra.
Yeah.
It's great in its context, but totally out of context for Valli and certainly for 1970. So to be now seeing this stuff in 1970 at such a diverse difference, which was never released or well, so talk about it's unreleased,
totally
or what was released was not promoted. I didn't hear any of this stuff until 1975, 76 on cassette.
Wow.
Yeah, most of it was so obscure that you never heard it on the radio.
No,
it was not. The program directors just weren't not attracted to it.
Well,
it wasn't within the concept of music was going through during those era.
Well, you know that the Stuart Miller, who was the president of the UK fan club, actually pulled the tracks together that were obscure from this period and put them out on a 50 pressing vinyl LP, including early stuff pre Four Seasons, as well as this stuff that was released in 45.
That was a bootleg only in the UK, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was put out by the fan club.
For the fan club, yeah. It was only for the fan club.
Yeah. So
actually, I saw a discography of the Four Seasons, and the person who did the discography actually had that as a footnote.
Well, yeah,
the UK bootleg.
It is an important milestone in the history of the fan.
There was a lot of chaos in the group at the time, where you had Nick Massey leave, and you had Tommy DeVito kind of outside of the set. So you just simply had Gaudio and Valli left, and Gaudio was more interested in producing and working on new items than he was touring. So the focus seemed to be at the time a transition almost from focusing on the Four Seasons music to focusing on Frankie Valli. And most of the music that I'm aware of that I heard during that period of time were the Frankie Valli singles or the Frankie Valli albums. They weren't the music of the Four Seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the other thing is that Bob Crewe suffered the collapse of his record companies and had a nervous breakdown with alcoholism.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
You know, that sort of curtailed everything. And of course, I think that situation, we don't know the personal circumstances, but there was a major fallout between Crewe and Gaudio at this time. But the one song that was so and it's fundamental, really, and I haven't really mentioned it before, that was part of and could have been part of this rarities, was the fact that Bob Gaudio and Bob Crewe had written A New Beginning. Now, at this time, and it's on the 27 track 3 tapes that I mentioned earlier. It says there, A New Beginning. So
Yeah.
so an instrumental track was laid down. Now, what we found when we went through the tape storage was there was a tape with 4 versions of A New Beginning, but they were by a country rock group. They weren't by the Four Seasons. The vocal just wasn't anybody that could have been the Four Seasons. And I think it was the group Lux or Light, which Gaudio had been working with at Gazette Records. So
Wow.
in my research, I concluded that I can't say that I'm right with regard to
Isn't there one? It actually sounded like Bob Gaudio himself singing it. It's a country western type song, but it's
country rock.
Yeah, country rock, right? Yeah, country. But
it's got a very heavy instrumental outro on one of the takes. It goes for about 2 minutes, just in a guitar, rambling guitar.
But I thought it was Bob Gaudio singing himself. It didn't sound like a group. It just sounded like one singer.
Yeah, it was only one singer, but obviously the backing group were a heavy
Oh,
instrument.
maybe that was the backing group. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe he used that backing group. If it is his vocal, well, that's a surprise to me. I've toyed with the idea of putting it on YouTube, but I think that it so diminishes the subsequent version, which we'll talk about on Motown.
Oh, that would be good though.
I think so. Heck yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was definitely Gaudio singing.
Right.
Sounded
Okay.
like
Well,
him to me anyway.
if you know his voice better than me, then I don't know his voice very well. I've never heard him sing really solo, so I don't know that. But the rest of the tracks that made up the end of this were really a sort of just throwaways. Where Are My Dreams was the unissued alternative mono Valli without the Four Seasons backing, and it doesn't have anything like the impact of the with the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
There was a great instrumental of "Come On, Marianne," which I think is just a great. It's a good Northern Soul track, but I wasn't too sure about including, and that reminds me, instrumental backing track, and this unnamed instrumental backing track which had appeared, and I thought to myself, well, nah, you don't really need those, but Snapper seemed to want to include them. So
the name one was kind of interesting, I thought.
The final one, yeah, because obviously I did connect when I listened to. I thought there's something familiar about that song, and I had a CD with Crewe connected tracks, and at 1974, the Morningside theme had exactly the same backbeat arrangement. So obviously they used part of that track for that. So that's what we did for that, and basically Snapper finished all this off themselves. And but the 3 tapes still remain a mystery, and obviously the 200 reels, because we talked about the 5-inch reel that was lost with 6 tracks. And I was talking to Bill Inglett, and he's of the opinion that they were lost at the time. They were put in the wrong box.
Wow.
And when you look at the Philips listing, they actually re-recorded 3 of them and released them as singles. So I think the tape was lost at the time, put in the wrong box or lost in the archive. And so they had to re-record. So we've lost 3 unreleased.
Wasn't there was a song that Frankie announced at a concert that he said is going to be my next single, and it's a song written by Bobby Darin. But I don't think that ever.
That was Maybe We Can Make It Together. Was called, and it was announced as a single, and that's on the that's pulled from one of the reels at Philips as an instrumental backing track. So why no vocals? Because obviously, if he was announcing it as a single, he must have recorded a vocal. So where's that vocal? It could be on one of the 200 reels that are in the unmarked reels that are in there. But the other thing about that list of 27 tracks is there's 2 tracks that I immediately identified. And one was called Train, which was the Ed Rambo song that he did with Charlie Colello in 1964, I think it was. And the other one,
Rain.
Rain from the Skies. And Ray Nichols sent me a letter,
Yeah.
which was written to VJ, asking Frankie Valli from a publisher to record it. And I haven't had time before the session to locate it on YouTube, but it is there. And it was recorded by a very unknown guy on one rare label. But the song did exist, and it was back in 1964. And it was a song he may have taken to Phillips. But I can't say from the real listings, because there are well, the list is reels. The Phillips reels are 4, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19 and 20. So all these 27 tracks were pulled from those reels. Well, why would you pull an instrumental 16 track when particularly when you've got the Gooses recorded there and complete, and Need to Get to Know You's there, but wow, why didn't the rest have vocals? It's a mystery, and we may never know. Well, we probably will never know. So
Yeah,
that really is the story of the research that brought this set of bonus tracks together.
Right. That was the end of the Phillips era.
That was it. Yeah, interesting.
It just faded out, and they walked away from the contract with 3 tapes with a bunch of instrumental tracks, and a few other cans with unreleased tracks, which were lying around in storage.
Wow. Now, if I may ask, Ken, or if anybody can answer, how long did that dispute go on with Phillips? What year did it start, and what year did it end?
Well, it started in when they left, because there was a dispute over the ownership of the original masters.
Yeah.
Which was 69 or 70?
70.
It would be 70. It would be 70. These copies were actually done in 71.
Okay.
The tracks that were copied to these 3 tapes were done in 71.
I think that the Four Seasons didn't want Phillips to have the right to continue to lease their masters, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. And it didn't finish till 1973. And then the tracks were offered to Motown, and Motown didn't want to issue them.
Right. So they went to
Longinus.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm actually not sure, because I've never had a copy of the Longinus set, but I've never ever had a chance to compare any of the masters that went into that set with what we have now in this box set.
Yeah.
So it has that Longinus.
That would be interesting.
I've read comments, and of course people say, "Oh, it sounds great," but they're just fans like me saying that. So,
well, the thing, I don't know. I've not got any of the sleeve notes either. So the thing to do is check the timings.
There aren't any. There are. I read on the comments, and they say there's nothing at all.
Nothing.
It's just the records. There's no information with the records. There's no liner notes. Doesn't even say who wrote the songs. There's no information at all.
Well, there could be previously unreleased copies of takes that have been supplied to Longinus from the tapes at the time, which of course
that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, you need listening tests on that. But really, you'd have to digitize.
Yeah, you'd have to actually just listen to them all.
You'd have to digitize, which is a big jump. But
we have a period of time from the end of the Phillips contract and the 3 recordings in the UK, and then there was a gap before they officially signed with Motown. and start working with Motown.
Yeah.
Are we aware of anything that they were doing on the side or demos or anything?
Yeah. Well,
in that
it said
period?
it was said by Bob Gaudio to UK people that many of the songs for Chameleon were written whilst they were touring in the UK.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
I
interesting.
don't have any more details than that. That was a note.
So a lot of the original work they for their first Motown release was
Yeah,
probably under construction in that period of time when they weren't contracted.
yeah. Well, when we need to revisit the Motown period in our next session and
Yeah,
talk
I
through
would agree.
That's fine.
what
Yes.
happened and the period, the timeline, and how the sessions fell, and you know what got left and what remains still there unreleased. But Bill Engler did confirm that he said that I'm not quoting him. No, he did say that he had seen the Motown tapes, but not on this occasion. And there certainly was a lot of stuff by the Four Seasons on tapes. But then I've confirmed all that.
Yeah.
So I'm not quoting him. I'm quoting me from the paper records that Motown produced. But we'll drill down into that.
Another
Again.
20 or so.
Yeah.
I have a last question here, which has always bothered me, and I don't know if there's an answer, but all right. So the Four Seasons recorded the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. That was in '69. It was a failure commercially, and I guess Gaudio was depressed. And so there was a time when nothing was seemingly going on. And then what's their next 45 that they released after the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette? It was And That Reminds Me. And That Reminds Me. I mean, obviously completely different than anything in the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. But
Well, Crewe,
it came out.
it's
It
not
came out
right,
on the Crewe label.
you know. Well, yeah, but Crewe had already released Singles Game, hadn't they? Or was that the other side?
That was the other side. That
Right.
was the flip side of And That Reminds Me. But they
It
were
was
still
obvious.
under contract to Philips. And
Yeah,
yet
but
it comes out on the Crewe label. I couldn't figure out how that was. And then after that, the next album was Half and Half, which is on Philips, and it contains both And That Reminds Me and the Singles Game.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Well, yeah, it does, because it was said that they had a major fallout with Philips about
Yeah.
not releasing material after
Right.
the Imitation Life Gazette, and they were pushing for stuff to be released, and Philips wouldn't release it. So
Yeah.
Crewe took it upon himself to record them on the Crewe label and issue it as a minor label. Obviously,
Why wouldn't
you
Philips have said, well, that's a breach of contract. You
Yeah.
can't do that. You can't release a song on another label.
Yep, that's why they had the dispute.
Maybe they didn't
Yeah.
care. Maybe Philips didn't care. I don't know.
No, Philips did care, and I think that led to the dispute. And so the resolution of the dispute would be half and half. Agree to do half and half.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
They
That
wouldn't
was
do a Frankie Valli album. They wouldn't do a Four Seasons album. So the compromise was do a half and half.
yeah.
Make a good job of it. And Crewe went away and produced that whole album with Gaudio, and probably paid for it to be done, because
The half and half, you mean?
the tapes are all different. They're all
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Crewe did that. Crewe recorded the Four Seasons and then presented the results to Philips, and he did with VJ as well. So it's all Crewe Gaudio production stuff that ended up being put to the record label, and we can't figure any more out than that. And
Oh, and is this a myth that when they were still at Philips, they were supposed to actually have another album that was called 1970? Is that a myth?
I'm not quoting anybody, but I was told that Bob Gaudio had planned an album and was trying to push Philips to issue an album called 1970. Well,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure what could have been the theme of that album and what could have
Well, I thought "Lay Me Down" would have been
Lay Me
sort of,
Down, Heartaches
yeah.
and Raindrops, Where Are
Yeah.
My Dreams, and other.
Maybe he was working on New Beginning then, and that
Yeah.
that been
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we'll probably never know. But great subject matter to drill down into, guys. So
It is. It is.
so
Oh yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed this feedback. And I just can't get over what 4 years of my life entailed. You know, when I think about all these tracks and where they were and what little snippets of information we found, and what we didn't find. You know.
Yeah. That's a lot of years there. Can you put into this a lot?
Yeah. Yeah, but
So
you know, as we said in the previous one, it all started in 1997.
Right.
So the next session will be back to Motown with
Well,
Camille.
back to Motown, the start of the rise of the Four Seasons, which was probably attempted to be suppressed by from all angles that we look at, but we'll get into that next time.
By Motown.
That sounds great. That sounds great.